Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving straight into something absolutely massive today. We're unpacking Dr. Atiq Rahman's extraordinary, comprehensive roadmap for the future of humanity. Across his 5 groundbreaking books, Dr. Rahman essentially builds a master diagnostic of our modern cognitive crisis. But more importantly, he gives us the exact blueprint we need for survival. Let's dive in. Right off the bat, Dr. Rahman sets up the incredibly high stakes of our time with this powerful premise. He says every age produces an information order. The ultimate prize is the sovereign mind. Think about that for a second. Our current information ecosystem, it is not neutral. It is an active battlefield. Geopolitical conflicts today aren't just being fought over physical territory or resources anymore. They are literally being fought directly inside your head. The ultimate prize here is your ability to perceive reality, make independent decisions, and ultimately retain your own agency. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the embryonic information decade, check out the architecture of the new order, look at winning the narrative wars, unpack mind over market dynamics, forecast the future of humanity, and wrap up with reclaiming epistemic sovereignty. Let's get to it. Section 1. The embryonic information decade. Dr. Rahman masterfully points to a right now, specifically the years 2025 to 2035, as what he calls the embryonic decade. And guys, this is a seriously tight window. It's this exact 10-year span where human cognitive capacity is dangerously crashing into algorithmic scale. It's essentially a massive collision of 3 forces: rapidly advancing technology, a total vacuum in global governance, and a deeply fragile human condition. The decisions that states, corporations, and you and I make during this specific decade, they're going to lock in the trajectory for the rest of the century. The window to act is open right now, but it is closing fast. Moving to Section 2, Architecture of the New Order. To understand where we are, you have to look at where we've been. Historically, we lived in the age of discovery. Information was scarce, it was guarded by institutional gatekeepers, and finding the truth required actual, active pursuit. Well, today, we've plunged headfirst into the age of the algorithm. We are essentially suffering from information obesity. Instead of reliable gatekeepers, we're navigating what Rahman calls casino architecture. Our digital platforms are quite literally built like Vegas slot machines. They prioritize emotional outrage to keep us glued to our screens, rather than actually keeping us informed. And this brings up a massive systemic vulnerability. Rahman introduces this concept called the cognitive leapfrog, and honestly, it's fascinating but terrifying. Entire populations, particularly across the global south, have leaped directly from oral traditions or limited print cultures straight into hyper-curated, AI-driven digital environments. They entirely bypass the centuries of print literacy that helped build up our critical evaluation skills in the first place. So this sudden digital immersion leaves billions of people incredibly vulnerable to manipulation, simply because their psychological defenses just haven't had the time to develop. Which brings us to Section 3, Winning the Narrative Wars. Let's break down how this psychological warfare is actually executed on the ground. Rahman outlines this terrifying 4D model of disinformation maneuvers. First, bad actors dismiss inconvenient facts. Then they distort reality to fit whatever their agenda is. Next, they distract the public with manufactured outrage. And finally, they push you into the most dangerous stage, dismay. This is where psychological warfare systemically breaks down a target until they reach a state of complete hopelessness. The goal isn't even to make you believe a specific lie. It's to make you so utterly overwhelmed and exhausted that you just give up on the very concept of truth. And as a result, we're now facing a modern weapon called the liar's dividend. This is wild. In a post-truth environment, the public naturally becomes hyper-aware of things like deepfakes and AI generation, right? Well, dishonest actors actually exploit that skepticism. When undeniable, totally real footage of an event surfaces, they just shrug and claim, oh, that's AI generated. By merely introducing that tiny seed of doubt, they completely neutralize the truth. It makes holding anyone accountable almost impossible. Let's pivot to Section 4, Mind over Market Dynamics. So, how exactly is your mind being hacked? Well, commercial frameworks have meticulously mapped out human cognition for profit. Markets are designed to activate our irrational emotions. They bypass our conscious objections using advanced neuromarketing, and they trap us with habit-forming hook models. Now, here is the really scary part. The exact same tools that were engineered to sell you consumer products are now being weaponized to sell you political narratives. Your attention is the commodity, and your mind is the market. That takes us to Section 5, the future of humanity. If we look at the trajectory from 2025 to 2035 and we assume zero intervention, the civilizational consequences are pretty dark. Epistemic integrity fractures entirely due to generative AI. Mental health deteriorates into profound isolation, largely driven by synthetic AI companions. In our political agency, it erodes to the point where democratic participation is basically minimal. Dr. Rahman calls this end state digital sepsis. It's essentially a total systemic infection of our shared reality. But there is a fix. Section 6, Reclaiming Epistemic Sovereignty.
So, what's the actual antidote to all this? It boils down to two words: epistemic sovereignty. This is the absolute essential vocabulary for any leader or institution aiming to survive this crisis. And to be clear, it's not just about telling people to log off. It's about a population's fundamental ability to own, evaluate, and actually govern its own information ecosystem. Achieving this means we have to sharpen individual cognition, totally rebuild our institutional credibility, and foster deep cultural resilience.
To rebuild this epistemic infrastructure, Rahman lays out a roadmap that requires simultaneous action. First, we absolutely have to deploy technical standards, like C2PA, to attach verified paper trails to digital media so we know what's real. Second, we need to implement AI, not to replace human judgment, but to act as a cognitive bridge connecting decision makers directly with ground reality. And third, we have to mandate epistemic education. We need to be teaching civic AI literacy in schools so that every single citizen is equipped to navigate through this noise. The window is still open, guys. We do not have to accept a fractured, manipulated future, but it requires deliberate, unified action right now, while we are still inside this embryonic decade. Which leaves us with one final critical question to chew on. Will you actively work to be an architect of a transparent, sovereign new order, or will you just allow yourself to become another casualty of the narrative wars? The choice is entirely up to you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.